Hey, what's up guys? Gonz here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. Just a quick shout out to John Haller over at Fellowship Bible Chapel. You can check out his videos, the prophecy updates. He does them every weekend. And John's a guy who I look up to as an elder, but we got into some serious disagreements about Bible doctrine stuff, and that's going to happen. And it got pretty heated at certain points. Nevertheless, he's a great guy, and he really does care about what's going on out there. And he's one of those guys that gets it. So I appreciate his work, so you guys should at least check it out. Now, he pointed out a specific forum that took place at the World Economic Forum, Davos 2016, Life in 2030, Humankind and the Machine. And I'll leave links in the description for the whole thing. It's an hour and a half or so if you want to check it out. Otherwise, here's the first 10 minutes.
Welcome to the Open Forum, Life in 2030.
I'm Zanny Minton-Beddoes from The Economist. Delighted to be back here moderating another one of these terrific open forums, and this is an extraordinarily important and interesting subject. Life in 2030. I think you don't need me to tell you that we are on the brink of a revolution technologically. I believe the World Economic Forum likes to call it the fourth industrial revolution. It's the convergence of many things: artificial intelligence, genome editing, big data, all manner of things together. And what we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to do a little futurology. We're going to ask this extraordinarily distinguished panel, what do they think will be the game-changing technologies? How precisely will these technologies change life? What are the, if any, social, moral, and ethical concerns we might have? And how do we make sure these technologies change life for the better? But before we do that, I wanted to get a sense of the optimism or pessimism about technology in the room. So I wanted to, in a show of hands, to see whether you think life will be better or worse in 2030. Will you raise your hand if you think life will be better in 2030 than it is today? I would say that's less than half. What do you think?
It looks very optimistic.
It looks very optimistic?
Yeah. Okay.
Good crowd.
Okay, good crowd. Well, we'll see if we can have every hand raised by the end, or whether then we'll have no hands raised. But to answer these questions, a really fabulous group of people here, and I'm just going to introduce them all very briefly. Eric Anderson, chairman of Planetary Holdings USA. Eric is a space entrepreneur. He is, for example, a founder of a company that does asteroid mining. That's Eric. I'm sorry? No. And then next to Eric, we have Jennifer Doudna, professor of chemistry and molecular and cell biology at the University of California, Berkeley. Then Nita Farahani, professor of law and philosophy at Duke University. Then we have Thomas Hendrik Ilves, president of Estonia, but also a man who learned to program at 13, I gather. And then Andrew Moore, dean of the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon. I'm sure you will agree that this is an extraordinarily distinguished panel, and if that any group of 5 people can tell us with some confidence what the world will be like in 2030, it is this group. So what I thought we'd do to start with is just literally go around the 5 of you and tell me what you think will be the most important game-changing technology or technologies. And Jennifer, why don't we start with you?
Well, I would say that the things that come to mind with that question are genome editing, genome engineering, which is what I do, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. It means being able to change the DNA in cells very precisely. But I also think things like energy storage, sort of big data manipulation, sustainability, figuring out how to have more sustainable sources of energy and chemicals are all also going to be equally game-changing.
Eric, what do you think?
Well, given my background in space, I would say the advent of ultra low-cost, highly reliable space travel. It will open up the solar system. It will, look, in order for humanity to prosper, if we want future generations to have the same levels of growth and prosperity and quality of life that we've had, we need access to more resources. We need to use energy from space. We need resources from space. We need to live in space. And that's going to be enabled by low-cost space travel, which will happen by 2030.
So all those folks who said that I'm crazy, they're not trying to leave the planet, well, there you have it.
Nita, We're going to come back to all of these, don't worry. We're just getting a sense of where everybody is.
I'm still stunned by that, but yes. So I think two things. One is the quantified self. So many people here probably are already wearing different kinds of fitness trackers and other ways to measure information about ourselves. And I think that kind of access to ourself and learning about ourselves and empowering us to take control of our health and to understand better what's happening is going to be incredibly powerful. And particularly on that front, I think some of the abilities to decode what's happening in our brain through the quantified self, like the consumer-based EEG devices that enable you to read the activity in your brain. And the second, I think, is getting an understanding of the microbiome. So, most of what we are is actually made up of the bacteria that we cohabitate with, and understanding the relationship between our bacterial selves and the rest of ourselves, I think, is going to be incredibly powerful.
Thomas, what do you think it will be?
Well, I think that, well, first and foremost, anything that is based on the digital revolution, if we have 8 iterations of Moore's law between now and 2030, which means basically every chip for the same cost will be 2 to the 8th times more powerful than it is today. Europe, if it doesn't get its act together, both in education and in also its legal system and approach to digital issues, digital single markets, or becomes protectionist, will fall behind, and countries like India have huge potential to become major players, not in the traditional military sense as we've had up till now, but in fact as a primary source of innovation.
The last addition to our...
let me just add, and big data together with the genome, I should also say, I think will have a huge role as well.
Andrew, what's your...
Well, firstly, I have to agree with each of these panelists so far, and that's not fun, by the way. We're going to find a way to disagree with each other later. One of the... I come from Carnegie Mellon University, where we have 500 faculty and students spending their entire careers working on artificial intelligence. So we spent a lot of time thinking about what the introduction of artificial intelligence means to the world. And for 2030, there's one prediction which I'm fairly confident about. And this is a branch of AI a lot of us call cognitive assistance, which is basically the little speaker on your shoulder giving you advice all the time. So one thing I've noticed at Davos has been the big CEOs and the statesmen wandering around often are accompanied by assistants with clipboards and calendars or on the phone and checking ahead to make sure everything's ready for them. And if you look at how things like Apple Siri and the Google search engine and other systems like that are evolving, more and more they're helping with these kinds of cognitive assistance. So by 2030, I expect that an elementary school teacher, it will be as though he or she walking into the classroom has a bunch of experts around them reminding them, you know what, Betty was looking miserable last lesson, see if you can find out what's going on. Or watch out, there's a warning that the weather's going to get bad and the kids might be alarmed. So I'm imagining a world where we all have a bunch of cognitive assistants helping us. And that's not just a convenience, it will be very transformative in how we work.
But this is an extraordinarily broad range. So we have genome editing, we have ultra cheap and reliable space travel, we have the quantified self, we have the broad big data digital revolution, and we have cognitive assistance. Now, I want to ask each of you, because I think you, Thomas, you mentioned this. One question is how these all interact and how these all come together. And so for the two of you who, and I think genome editing and the quantified self are in the sort of health, biological side of things, are we going to have, Jennifer, designer babies by 2030?
Yes.
What does that mean? Can you explain what will the process of, will we be able to choose our offspring's eye color and so forth? And because that will then raise lots of questions. Tell us what life will be like in 2030 in terms of genome editing.
Well, that's 14 years away, and right now, we have the technology to make very precise changes in essentially any kind of cell, including in human embryos, and it's actually already been done by a group in China. And so what's coming, I think, in the future is the potential to make changes to the human genome that will give us cures for disease, as well as potentially what one might term enhancements, however you want to define that. I think two things really hold us back right now. One is ethical challenges, figuring out how to deal with that societally, And the other is, frankly, just our lack of knowledge about the genome. We don't yet know enough to be able to really make the kind of program changes that you're talking about, but it's coming. And I would like to just add that I actually think this connects very importantly to what Eric said about space travel, because I think that if you want to have humans traveling in space, we're clearly going to need to have genome editing to protect ourselves from the radiation damage and all sorts of other things that will come up in that unique environment of space, and we can talk more about that.
Eric, I'm going to come to you and whether we need to have a genome editing for space travel in a second, but Nita, what's your take on that? Do you think Jennifer's right that we'll be there, and how does that fit with the quantified self? I mean, we're also going to have people living for, forever because they are able to monitor their health well enough.
Right, maybe they won't need to if they've already been edited, right? So I agree with Jennifer. I think we will certainly have the ability to create so-called designer babies. We already do have that ability, not yet doing it aside from in non-viable embryos for gene editing, but what we already do is a lot of different design, right? So we start by choosing the person that we want to have children with, and that's already choosing some selection about what their genome will look like. We already have pre-implantation genetic selection, so people who do in vitro fertilization, that is, they go through a means of extracting an egg from a woman, extracting sperm from the male, putting them together, they can then screen those before they're actually transferred, and people are already doing that. I think the question is what concerns should we have about that? And one of the concerns we should have right now about doing it on a scale with something like gene editing is how safe is it for the future generations? What does it mean to be manipulating our genomes rather than using a process of selection? And what does that look like for the next generation and the generation after that? What does it look like to the human genome and to the kind of broad process of evolution? Are we going to get to the point by 2030 where we feel comfortable enough that could be used in our germline, something that's passed on in future generations, as opposed to gene therapies, which would just affect the current generation? And we have to wonder what that society looks like. So what kinds of things are going to be okay to select and edit? Is it going to be okay to pick first, very serious diseases that are just one point in the genome? The answer is yes, probably. We'll probably be very comfortable with that. Then, is it okay to choose some traits, like, for example, if we could quantify and understand the many different things that contribute to intelligence, can we start to manipulate that? And what does that look like, and does that trade off with other traits that we might have? Does it trade off with creativity? Does it trade off with diversity? Does it create a kind of super elite that is more competitive than the other groups of individuals? And who's doing it? So if we have individual parents and couples making choices about things that they want to enhance in their children, that might be very different than state-sponsored choices where governments are making decisions about what kinds of things need to be edited and what kinds of shaping of the population might look like. And so the kind of broad concern about eugenics would come into play depending on in whose hands it's in. That all plays in with the quantified self because, in part, we may live a lot longer. Life expectancy has already increased just in our lifetimes. But what does it mean when you take the kind of data that you get from the genome, starting from the time that a person is an embryo, and you have that now fully quantified. So before the person is ever born, you know everything about their genome, all of the predispositions that we know to date. How does that affect how we interact with that person, what opportunities we give that person, what limitations we put on what kinds of things that person can participate in? These are all issues we're going to have to grapple with.
They are.
Now, there's a lot there, but check out this little snippet about 47 minutes in.
Humanity is becoming more and more powerful. First we had fire, it burned us, we learned how to use that. Many generations ahead, we figured out how to harness the power of the atom. It's both our most destructive force, but it's also a force that keeps people warm and powers, half the world, whatever the number is. Mm-hmm. The same is true of all these other things. They require rules. And again, the rules better be there pretty quickly because we're reaching the point where the acceleration in all of these areas of technology is on Moore's law. When hardware problems become software problems, when all companies are software companies, it's all accelerating at Moore's law.
And who should make the rules?
Well, our government should make the rules.
Well, let me push you on that because you are the person who says that very soon we're going to have cheap interspace travel, and we're going to do it because it may not be so nice here. We're going to need other planets to live on.
That's not what I said. I didn't say that we were going to do it for that reason.
we're doing.
We are going to have
We're going to need more resources.
We're going to need more resources to ensure greater prosperity on Earth, but also, so I could see how you could interpret that way, and I maybe should have communicated that better. But the other major thing, which will be one of the great moments in the history of life, on par with a single-cell organism becoming a multi-cell organism, is that we will become a multi-planetary species.
Sorry, guys, I know this is a serious subject, but this guy made me laugh, okay? The history of life and how we're going to become a multi-planetary species, and he's like all excited about it. Like, this is the world we're living in, guys.
Okay, well, let's take as given we're going to, within 14 years, start to become a multi-planetary species. You, more than anybody on this panel, have focused on the need for legal frameworks. How are we going to create a legal framework for a multi-planetary species?
Very carefully.
Who's going to do it?
It's a great question. I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm an engineer. I'm an entrepreneur.
So could I weigh in as a legal
but
scholar?
it's a great question. Please, maybe she has the answer.
Tom first. Tom, you
Well,
go first.
This is a serious problem even today, not to mention 14 years from now.
Interplanetary travel?
No, the legal framework to deal with modern technology. And as I said, our legal system is so far behind our current level of technology, not to mention future levels. And this comes down to,
I, as a legal scholar, want to say, yes, the answer is in law, that we can solve all of these problems. But law doesn't keep up, and I'm not sure that it should be the solution. So I sit on the President's Commission for Bioethics in the US, and we've been spending some time thinking about a lot of these complex issues and emerging technologies. What is a system of governance? And so on the one hand, you could take an approach that's a precautionary approach and simply say you don't bring anything to market until you know all of the risks and you can deal with them. That isn't the approach that we've taken, or that I personally take, because I think technology will progress, and it's a good thing for it to progress, and you can't know all of risks. You have to be able to act in the face of risk. And so how do you do it? And I think part of the way you do it is through the process of deliberative democracy. That is, engaging far more of the stakeholders to be part of the conversation, rather than leaving it up to the government to decide and to tell us what the answer should be. So, while 500 faculty and students are working on these problems on artificial intelligence and far more worldwide, I hope that what they're doing is engaging stakeholders in the conversation rather than just programming for themselves to figure out how do you make the trade-off. And I assume if somebody spent 2 years doing that part of the reason that they spent 2 years doing the question of the animals and the human lives is they're engaging people in a broad process of deliberative democracy. So the question of, do we want designer babies? Do we want artificial intelligence? Has to start by having a large societal conversation across the globe, maybe across the planets, and in order to figure out what we as a people want, and to have that govern, rather than simply then having law, because law will lag behind. It has to be a partnership between the public and the government. The government can't decide for us. It has to inform those choices.
You know what? I'm going to take you at your word and then conduct a little bit of participatory into this conversation now, because we have been hogging the floor a lot. Yes, gentleman there, 7 rows back.
Yeah, I wanted to dig into the space mining a little bit. Okay. Asteroid mining, sorry. Fascinating. Clearly, all the molecules that are on this planet came from outer space, so it makes absolute sense. But there's the problem of gravity and the difficulty of re-entry. So could you expand a little bit more? What you're gonna mine, is that mainly to stay in orbit, to construct things in orbit, or maybe to bring it to the moon, where entry is a little bit easier than bringing it back down to Earth? How far developed are your plans around that?
Pretty far developed. I'll give a quick answer. So there's lots of different things that we mine for on Earth, and there will be lots of different things we mine for in space. The first thing we'll do is turn ice on asteroids into fuel. Fuel is what lets you get around, and essentially we create the gas stations in space to put satellites and place them in different orbits and do it much less expensively, to go places, to bring that cost way, way, way down. We also bring materials back that we need. Platinum group metals. Platinum group metals came from space. There are no platinum group metals that exist on the Earth's surface that didn't originate from an asteroid impact. We've been mining asteroids for centuries. We've just been doing it on Earth. And by the way, the point I wanted to make about the legal structure is, in 1968, everybody in the world was worried about who was going to get to the moon first, the Soviet Union or the United States. And guess what? They got it together and they made the Outer Space Treaty. And the Outer Space Treaty of 1968 said that whoever got there first couldn't claim it as part of their country. So that was a problem, It took some rocket launches and some demonstrations of a threat to figure it out, but they did. And now the problems are accelerating faster. And so my whole point in that whole thing was just that we need to speed up this parallel technology development with rulemaking and policy making and things like that.
Now, I sped it up a little bit and edited some parts of it so it just moves quicker, but you get the idea here of what's happening. And let me tell you that just here where I'm at, things are developing that are pretty crazy. Infrastructure. They talk about this being the next level of the Industrial Revolution, this boom that's about to occur in technologies that suit our civilization. It involves space and gene editing and big data, quantifying self, all these things that are going to be tied with the economic system, because the economic system is what is bringing forth this technology all around us in a new civilization, right? So this is why this discussion needs to happen in the church, and it's not happening. So what's going on? It's time, people. This discussion needs to happen now because the World Economic Forum has announced it's happening in the next 15 years, and that includes biochips and everything. And I think there is a responsibility for Christians to share this information. So first off, let me relay for you a few different stories that will get you thinking, okay, about spirituality, technology, the future, economy, all this stuff. First, you have this religion that's spreading, and it's basically the Jedi. It's the Star Wars mythology, first as a joke, an excuse to dress up like the characters, but eventually building on that into something more, something where they're actually, talking about the cosmology and worldview of the Star Wars universe and suggesting or applying parts of it to reality. And they even talk about the disagreements within different factions within. So, I guess the human being is incapable even in those situations to fully agree on everything. But the reason why I bring this up is because it's almost like a spiritual free-for-all. Anybody can come up with whatever system they want to for their cosmology, and anything goes. That's the world we're living in now, and this story really exemplifies that fact. Right here, in my backyard, they're going to start building a test track for the Hyperloop. And here are some of the sketches and everything going on, what it's going to look like. I mean, this is pretty future-y stuff that they're building here, and it's supposed to happen in a visible area from the freeway is what I was told, but I don't know. I haven't seen all the specifics yet. But it will be interesting to see this develop. And again, it goes back to infrastructure, this transportation system that changes civilization. And so I can see the excitement of those who harness the power, essentially to control some of the unleashing of this technological progress. But it doesn't mean we should be doing it, and it doesn't mean we should be doing it at the pace we're doing it, especially. So it is interesting that it's almost like the people who dedicate their lives to pursuing these things are somewhat possessed by some kind of spirit. So that's happening. And that's tied to space because you have Elon Musk, who's the main face or guy behind the whole Hyperloop thing. And then you have his other company, SpaceX, that they've been doing tests with all this new space technology that's not really that impressive. They probably do have anti-gravity technology at this point, and we can talk about how they got there. But this is a front to slowly bring out those technologies. And when I say they, I mean the cabal, the elite who are behind this, who throw out a guy like Elon Musk to be their face. But anyway, this third story is really at the heart of what this discussion should be about because it does revolve around Christianity. Televangelist Morris Cerullo wants to build a Bible-themed resort in San Diego, and here's what the plans are. Evangelist Morris Cerullo, widely known for his overseas healing crusades and the occasional legal skirmish, now is hoping to cement his spiritual legacy with the help of hologram-filled catacombs, a 20-foot-tall Wailing Wall, and an interactive biblical museum. And you can read on here, $125 million project, hoping for approval in the San Diego City County. And here's a quote from the article. It's a business model. It's just based around religious themes rather than secular themes. And if you look up who said this, it was Jim Penner, the executive director of the Morris Cerullo Legacy Center. Now, I've never heard of Morris Cerullo, but it appears he has a lot of money. He's done institutional church stuff, trying to salvage the Christian theme park in South Carolina, founded by disgraced evangelist Jim Bakker in the 1990s. And he's quoted as saying that he doesn't want the ministry to die after he dies. And Morris Cerullo seems to care more about his ministry than God's ministry. Now, God's ministry is not going to die. It's not going to go away when Cerullo passes on. It's a very worldly perspective, and it doesn't accurately reflect Christianity and its message in its purest form. The question is this the proper response? Do you get ahead and, implement this technology? Or is this an infiltration of the church, and it starts with doctrine, it starts with the word and how it is carried in different generations? And we're dealing with that now. I know a lot of people still like having a physical Bible and reading out of that, and I certainly do as well. But I do consume a lot of Bible stuff just on the internet or on the screen, on applications. It's a different situation from a lot of what our predecessors had access to. So things are changing in those ways as well. So it becomes more important what we maintain as integral to the faith, to understanding the gospel. And the question becomes, how do we utilize these tools that have been placed before us in this time and space where God has put us in? So again, I think this discussion needs to happen now. There are plenty of outlets, forums, and places that you can post your thoughts and ideas. But more importantly, have that discussion with your friends, your family, your pastor even, because these stories are out in the news now. I mean, it's just happening around us. It's being reported by mainstream places. So it's not hard to pick up on some of these topics and discuss them with friends and family or people in your community because it's there, it's happening now. And, there's no shortage of stuff like this anymore. And so there's really no excuse to at least spark a conversation about it. And undoubtedly, you're going to have questions. That's why I think we have to build these communities online to provide answers, biblically foundational answers that are in there. And it ties into Bible prophecy, and it just opens up a whole different world for people to start understanding the Word of God and the Bible and how it applies to reality and their lives. It can be a very powerful thing, and I think there is going to be a revival of the church, a sort of remnant or underground Christian community that's already being built. I think there is going to be a powerful revival as these technologies start to manifest and, become everywhere. I think the community of the Christian underground, the remnant, whatever you want to call it, is going to display the gospel and its message in the proper way, in the way it was supposed to be done in this generation, all for the glory of God. Come quickly, Lord Jesus. Thanks for watching my video. Please share it with friends, family, and whoever else you think might benefit from this information. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel and dig around the archives. I have hundreds of videos covering topics ranging from angels, aliens, and the Antichrist to global conspiracies of the New World Order, eugenics, genetics, Genesis 6, the Nephilim, transhumanism, and much, much more. And don't forget to check out my full-length documentaries, Age of Deceit, Fallen Angels, and the New World Order, and Age of Deceit 2, Alchemy, and the Rise of the Beast Image, all of which you can watch for free right here on the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. And if you want even more content, check out canarycryradio.com, our podcast where we investigate similar issues and interview all kinds of experts on several different topics. In fact, we just finished episode 100, which is 7 hours long, where we interviewed 26 people in one podcast episode. You can find the podcast at canarycryradio.com or go subscribe to the Canary Cry Radio YouTube channel. Again, thanks for watching and have an awesome day. God bless.